Question. So I've been going through a really tough time the past few years in my practical life. But around the beginning of the year, I felt like the cycles shifted. A lot of really positive things started happening in my career. My business is growing. We're going on national television for our company next month. Sales are increasing. I feel an increase in my own personal power and confidence. I feel a growing energy in my auric field. It's very interesting to observe. However, I also feel like with a heightened energy, it feels like my ego is trying to strengthen itself as well. I'm really trying to focus on gratitude, centering myself, being aware of my reactions. Do you have any insights that could help me with this situation? Well, yes. So, basically what I would say here is that despite the claims made by many spiritual teachers, you are never going to be completely ego-free while you're on this little wonderful planet we call Earth. And I know it may sound like I'm contradicting myself, because what am I talking about in many of my videos? I'm talking about we have these subconscious selves, and we have two kinds of subconscious selves. The ones that are just necessary for us to take embodiment, and then the dualistic selves, the separate selves that we created by going into separation and duality. And I have said several times that you can overcome the dualistic selves so that you are not acting based on these dualistic selves. And in order to do that, you have to follow the procedure I'm talking about in several videos. Look at the selves, invoke spiritual light, come to see the illusion, and let the self die. You basically have to give up trying to solve the problem that the self is projecting that you have to solve. So you can get to a point where these dualistic selves are behind you. You're not acting as a separate being. But what I found in myself, I came to that point some time ago, and but what I found in myself is that there's always going to be the possibility that whatever happens to you, the ego is going to re-emerge, you might say, but not necessarily a dualistic ego or a separate ego. But so let's look at it another way. I have said in several videos that when the conscious you descends to take embodiment at the first time, it starts at what I call the 144th level of consciousness, the highest level. And then it has to descend to the 143rd, and it does that by taking on an illusion. And then it keeps taking on illusions until we go down to the 48th level, which is where we start. And then some go into, we've basically all gone into duality, gone below the 48th level, and then we climb back up. And then we start climbing up from the 48th level to the 96th level. And at the 96th level, you overcome what I have sometimes called the focus on yourself. Because what I've said is that below the 48th level, we basically have two approaches that people can take. Some people focus on making the separate ego as sophisticated as possible. And other people are not going into that. They go into just flowing with the collective consciousness. So most people, if you see them on Earth, they're not particularly evil, they're not particularly bad people, but they don't have a very strong individuality. So they just kind of flow. They're like, to use a metaphor, you have a jellyfish that can't really swim that much, so most of the time it's flowing along with the ocean currents. And I'm not thereby calling people jellyfish, I'm just giving an illustration. People are flowing along with the mass consciousness. So when you start climbing above the 48th level, you have to free yourself from the collective consciousness in your area, your family, your society, your culture. And in order to do that, you're building a spiritual sense of self. It's not a dualistic self necessarily, but it can have a certain dualistic aspect in the sense that you're still comparing yourself to others. And I can remember in myself, for first many years on the spiritual path, I was using the first teachings of transcendental meditation and then the teachings of the Ascended Masters, to build this sense of a sophisticated sense of self. I was more spiritual than the average person, like my family and the people I grew up with. And I wanted to be a good spiritual student and live up to all the outer demands of Ascended Master teachings or transcendental meditation before that. And so I was really trying to build this. I was using the spiritual teachings to build my spiritual sense of self. And the Ascended Masters have explained there isn't anything wrong with this. It's sort of what we need to do in order to climb from the 48th to the 96th level, to raise ourselves above the pull of the collective consciousness. And it comes to that point where you're no longer worried about what people think about you, what their opinions are, how to be popular or how to not be ostracized as a complete blithering idiot. You're just sort of daring to be yourself in that respect. But still, when you approach that 96th level, you need to come to the realization that this was just a phase on the spiritual path. And that now you need to actually start dismantling the separate or the spiritual self that you built. It's like a rocket where you have a big booster at the bottom that takes you up to the rocket to a certain altitude, and then it needs to fall away so the rocket can rise higher. And it's the same with us. So, first of all, I have seen spiritual people who didn't make that transition. They haven't made it fully. They haven't really understood the need to let go of this sense of self, that you want to be special as a spiritual person. So this can be one reason why the ego is strengthening when things are going well for you in the world. So this is one reason. You could be at the 96 level, but you haven't fully let go of that self. And so whenever something goes well for you in the world, there's a self that comes in and wants to compare, wants to say you're doing really well, and asserts itself. It's not a dualistic ego that wants to put other people down, but it's still this sense of self. So this can be one reason. But the deeper reason is that when you think about this, here comes the conscious you. It's really pure awareness, doesn't really have any sense of. It's difficult to put into words, but let's just put it this way. You have your spiritual self. Your spiritual self has a unique individuality. That's how it was created by the Ascended Masters that are your spiritual parents. They created you with a unique individuality. The spiritual self decides it wants to send an extension of itself to take embodiment on earth, the conscious you. But in order for the conscious you not to be trapped on earth, not to be hurt by anything that happens on earth, it doesn't have any individuality. It's, like I said, neutral awareness, pure awareness. But it can, of course, connect to the individuality in your I am presence. So it has it through that connection that has individuality. But when it descends and starts taking embodiment, as I said, at the 144th level, it's creating a self, a sense of self at the 144th level, then keep going down. And first it's building your sense of identity. Then it's building your mental body, your way of thinking. And then finally your emotional, and then it integrates with the physical. So what I'm saying is that what is the first step that the conscious you takes when it's there at the 144th level and it creates that first self to go to the 143rd? It creates an individual sense of self in this world, on earth, related to earth. Basically, you can say that what the conscious you creates as it's going down to the 48th level is an individuality that is a reflection of the individuality of your I am presence, but it's not identical to it, because the individuality you're building is relating to earth, how you see yourself in relation to earth. And so this is what you create at the 144th level. It's not like this is a dualistic sense where you want to be better than anybody else or you're in competition with others or this or that. But it's just still a sense of self in relation to earth, right? So the way I look at it is, and this is the way I've come to look at it over the last couple of years, is that this will be the last thing we give up before we ascend, right? So what I'm saying is, you can have a certain sense of a spiritual self at the 96th level that you haven't given up yet. And this can be part of the reason why when something good happens to you in the world, you feel something. You feel like some kind of being special. And you can have this desire to be special. I would basically say, if I look back at myself, I look back at many people I met on the spiritual path, many people on the spiritual path, they have this desire to be special. That's what drives us to find the path. It's just that instead of us having the desire to be special in the world by having, for example, a worldly career and making tons of money, we are more at the spiritual realm. Our attention is focused on spirituality, but we're still driven by this, want to be special. So I just recently saw a video where two people were talking about meditation, and there was one who was interviewing the other, and the one was supposed to be the expert, and the interviewer was saying, yes, and he logged 50,000 hours of meditation, and I'll be happy if I can get to 10,000. So all of a sudden you have this, here's now a measure on the spiritual path. If you've meditated so many tens of thousands of hours, you are more special. And that's what I'm saying. This is what drives many people on the spiritual path, and this is what drives you from the 48th to the 96th level. But this has to fall away at some point. And there are some spiritual people that have come there close to the 96th level, at the 96th level. You can even go beyond the 96th level because you still haven't let go of that, all of that spiritual self. It takes you a while to let go of it. So this can be part of what the person is talking about. You haven't fully let go of this spiritual self that took you to the 96th level. But beyond that, even beyond that, you will, as long as you're in embodiment, you have a certain sense of self in relation to this world. And you're not going to get rid of it. I don't care what anybody says that, oh, this master is ego-free, or this master is God-realized, and this master has reached cosmic consciousness. Okay? When you understand the mechanics of how we take embodiment, there will always be some sense of self relating to this world, or you cannot hold on to a physical body. You cannot function in a physical body. You cannot keep the physical body alive unless you have some sense of self. And I'm not saying that there aren't masters who have reached a very high level of consciousness, close to the 144th level, but they have let go of most of it. But I'm just saying there will always be something. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I have come to simply make peace with that fact. And I've come to say, well, it's not a matter of, let me step back a little bit. There came a point where in 2002, I started working with the Ascended Masters. And that was pretty much the point where I passed the 96th level and overcome this focus on self. But I still had a lot of psychology to work through. And so for years afterwards, I was feeling like, oh, I should really get over all psychology. I could get over all focus on the sense of self. And it was sort of a strain for me. It was sort of a stress because I felt like I wasn't there, I wasn't good enough, and this and that. And just within the last couple of years, that faded away. It was a period that took several years. But anyway, it faded away. And now I realized this whole dream that I should reach some ultimate level while I'm still in physical body embodiment. This is a fantasy. This is unrealistic. And I made peace with that fact. So now I'm saying, okay, as long as I'm in embodiment on this planet, there's always the possibility that my focus on self, my individual self-focus relating to this world, can suddenly rear its head, can suddenly gain more momentum, And therefore I need to be aware of it. I always need to be alert for this, that this could potentially happen. That, and especially if something happens in the world. Like, let's say I suddenly became famous and started selling millions of books, and everybody wanted me to come out and give a talk somewhere. Obviously, that is something that my individual sense of self, not necessarily a dualistic sense of self, but my individual sense of self would react to. And it could be strengthened so that it would say, yeah, now I really achieved something in this world. And this can actually then create an attachment to having a position in this world, to maintaining a position. And you know what the Buddha said about attachments, you can't ascend as long as you have any. So all I'm saying is that what I have come to make peace with over the last couple of years here is that I just always need to be alert for that. It's not that I'm dysfunctional, or there's something wrong with me, something I haven't attained yet. I just need to be alert of how this individual self will react to anything that happens in the outer situation. And that's just the price we pay for being an embodiment. But in order to get to that point, I really had, and it took me a while, it took me years to really struggle with the subtle aspects of it, this dream of being perfect while you are in embodiment, living up to some spiritual sense of perfection. I see some spiritual teachers on YouTube that are talking about, spiritual perfection, or being ego-free, or ego death, or this or that. And I just think, my experience has been that that's just a superficial view. It's a dream. You will never be completely ego-free in terms of the sense of self. You can be ego-free in the sense of a dualistic ego, where you're not coming from a state of separation, and you're not insensitive to other people or the consequences of your actions and this and that. But there will always be that very subtle sense of self, and it will just be there as long as you're holding on to a physical body. Because the moment you let go of that last aspect of that self, your body dies, and you're leaving it behind. I mean, it's just, that's when you're ready to ascend. So until you're ready to ascend, you will always have some individual sense of self. This isn't the focus on self, where I'm talking about at the 96th level, where you are so focused on yourself. You can come to a point where you're no longer focused on yourself, but every once in a while you can still sense, oh, there's something there. And I used to, really monitor myself, is there some kind of focus on self? Is there some kind of, and whenever I felt it, I thought, oh, this is a problem, I need to deal with it. I need to overcome that self and this and that. And now I'm more relaxed about it. I'm just saying, okay, we just monitor the situation, but most of the time I don't think about it. I'm just at peace about it. I'm just focused on whatever I'm doing. So anyway, I know this is abstract and subtle, but I hope it makes sense to some people.